Have you ever been on the tail end of a conversation where someone's talking at you and you find yourself responding with, uh huh, and the occasional, wow? There's nothing quite like someone talking at you to make you completely drown them out. And if you think that was a self-aware quip, it was. I'm Kendall, and this is Plot to Print, and I'm here to help. I know writing is hard, and I'm kind of here to talk about one of the maybe biggest pitfalls that we all tend to kind of run into at some point in time. But first, let's get back into that imaginary conversation that we're having with that person who's just talking at us. And they may think that their story is really cool and, worth telling you, but it's probably the way that they're going about it that's making you just mentally check out. This can and does happen with writing, with the dreaded info dump. And unless you're writing a scholarly dissertation, this is probably something you want to avoid in your fiction at all costs. So what exactly is an info dump? Well, an info dump is when a writer presents a whole bunch of information all at once. And so this can be backstory, this can be a character's background, this can be parts of the plot, this can be lore, all those kinds of things. And so you might be saying, hey, wait, me as a writer, I've spent a lot of time creating this world, creating these characters. I want my reader to know about them. And I absolutely agree. However, I also want to say, wait, because we can't, as much as we're excited about all the details of our story, we can't expect to avalanche a reader in those details and also expect them to stay engaged at the same time. So what do we do? And my first tip, I'll basically call it pepper it in. And so what exactly is that? First, I want you to take a look at your page and see how it looks structurally. Take a look at your page, the beginning of your story, wherever you think you might run into a lot of info dumping, which sort of tends to be at the beginning. And see how your page looks. Is it looking really dense? Does it have a lot of long paragraphs and run-on sentences? Or does it have some shorter paragraphs, maybe a single line of action, maybe some dialogue throughout there? That's one of our biggest hints, is when we look at our page and just take a look at the structure of it and how densely laid out our words are. I'm also going to say, as a reader, when I'm opening a book or reading a book and I see a lot of super dense prose, for me at least, it's a little intimidating, and I start to wonder, hey, just what am I about to get into right now? So you kind of want to look at it from a writer's perspective, but also look at it from a reader's perspective. How dense is your page? And I know us as writers, we kind of tend to want to present all this information because we're excited about it. We want our reader to know all those juicy details so that they want to keep reading our story. But at the same time, we sort of need to remember that we need to use patience. And I'll employ another thought experiment, if you will. So imagine we're cooking up a dish, our favorite recipe. And so do we want this dish to go unseasoned? Well, of course not. We want all that delicious seasoning in there. However, if we get overzealous and we decide to take our favorite seasoning and unscrew the top and just turn it all over into our pan, what happens? Well, we've over-seasoned our dish and we've probably ruined it. If somebody decides to take a bite, they might get 1 or 2 bites in before they realize they probably want to eat something else. So that's kind of a good way to look at it. And we can also pepper in details with other details by sort of getting creative. So let's say we want to talk about a character's appearance, but maybe we don't want to talk about their appearance all at once, but we're like, she has she has red hair and blue eyes and olive skin, and she's tall. We probably want to just give these details here or there and where they're pertinent and where they might fit in the best. So maybe we're going to talk about a character's red hair and say, she looked in the mirror and saw her red hair, which reminded her of the father she never knew. And, maybe we kind of painted that she's kind of annoyed by it because she never knew her father. But we can also go on in our prose and say, but it's undeniable that she's his daughter because she has this red hair. So there's creative ways to kind of pepper in information and also kind of use it to tell backstory and move the story along. Maybe your character is also going into town or going on a journey and they're seeing things around town that spark little memories for them. You can definitely kind of pepper in these things, these hints at further plot points that you may either talk about now or talk about later. And just kind of pepper those things in so that your reader stays engaged. They're wondering about, hey, what's that about? It was mentioned, but it wasn't mentioned all the way. And we kind of lead them into further parts of our story. And so that leads me to my next point, and that is show, don't tell. That's right, show, don't tell is something that us as writers hear a lot. And basically what show, don't tell is using action, it's using dialogue, it's using imagery and descriptions to tell your story, rather than just writing what happens. So a good example would be, I want to write about a character who's upset. And instead of saying, Annabelle was upset, I'm going to write, Annabelle slammed the glass down on the counter. So what this does is I'm using action to set the tone that my character is upset, basically. And what we kind of want to do when we're thinking about show, don't tell is we want to put on like our movie hats, sort of, and we want to start thinking about our book like a movie. And yes, books are different than movies, of course, but they kind of are the same when it comes to using action to kind of set the tone, action and imagery and dialogue to set the tone and move our stories along. Now, this becomes really important because the more we think about our book as a movie and the more we start trying to employ show, don't tell, the more it becomes almost impossible to info dump because you're so concentrated on sort of showing what happens on screen that you can't really get too thick into avalanching all at once your background or backstory or lore or anything like that. When you're concentrating on what is happening on the page at that moment, it becomes really, really hard to info dump. So I would say, think about your book a little bit like a movie. Yes, books are different, but at the same time, they do employ the same strategies to move the story along. And so that brings me to my next point, and that is focus on the present. The story that you're writing right now is happening in your character's life for a reason. It's happening right now in their life. It doesn't matter what tense you're using, if you're using first person present or anything like that. What is happening on the page is happening in your character's life right now. So that's a really important thing to remember, and it also kind of keeps the chain on info dumping too much and giving too much backstory. When you remember that you're telling these events that are happening in your character's life right now. Now, I will say the backstory is incredibly important for, any story. It lays the foundation for your story, and you need a good foundation for your story. But also at the same time, kind of putting some reins on how much backstory you share and when also will kind of help you to understand when details are relevant. And I'll kind of say, just examples from my own personal writing. I've written whole novels where I didn't describe the character's hair color or eye color because it wasn't pertinent to the story. I've also come up with backstory and lore, you know, for some of my stories, and never really gotten into all those details, even if I was really pleased with those details and I thought they were cool. Because, you know, maybe there was just nowhere for those details to fit and they didn't really move the story along. And yeah, you know, maybe I thought they were cool, but we also kind of need to know if and when to share something. And if and when is really important because you know, maybe I'm excited about a detail and I want to share it in chapter 1, but if I think about it, maybe it's going to hit a whole lot differently in chapter 10, and that's actually really where I should share it. And so when you kind of start, you know, showing some restraint on where, you know, you're putting information and when, you can sort of weave this web that'll get your reader all tangled up and want to keep reading. And that's really what makes for good and engaging writing. So, you know, definitely stay within what is happening in your character's life right now. And just maybe, like, you know, hold off on a detail. Maybe it's gonna hit differently and in just the right way a little bit later on in the story. So that's it. Now you know why Dumps Like a Truck only really works for the thong song. Basically, these are all tips that we need to remember. I hope this advice helps you. It definitely helps me to remember it as I work on my next book. So just always good to remember things that maybe we already know, or maybe, you know, hopefully I brought up a point maybe that really clicked with you. And so if it did help you out, feel free to like or subscribe or comment down below, and we will see you on the next one. Okay, bye.